listening to Program Notes for the Florida Orchestra's Huff Family Foundation Masterwork Series. I'm Andy Tefelsky, Social Media Manager of the Florida Orchestra, classically trained percussionist, and the host of this podcast. In this episode, I will be talking about William Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony, Felix Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor, and George Enescu's Romanian Rhapsody No. 1, so you can dive deeper into the music, anytime, anywhere. These audio program notes are authored by Kurt Loft, a local writer who has written about the arts in the Tampa Bay area for more than 40 years. You can find his full transcriptions at floridaorchestra.org. Alright, let's dive in. William Dawson, 1899 to 1990, Negro Folk Symphony, performance duration approximately 36 minutes. The composer, choir director, musicologist, and college professor William Dawson covered a lot of ground. He was born the year Richard Strauss conducted the premiere of A Hero's Life and died when NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope. In between, Dawson made his own imprint, and his contributions to American concert music are as individual as they are invaluable. Dawson is among the most significant African-American orchestral composers of the first half of the 20th century, along with Florence Price and William Grant Still. Folksong was his language, and he wove it seamlessly into works such as the Negro Folk Symphony, which, quote, epitomizes the musical aspirations of the Harlem Renaissance intellectual movement, notes the Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians. But Dawson has not been consistently recognized, and isn't even mentioned in Daniel Kingman's book American Music, A Panorama, which devotes a chapter to the African-American tradition. However, more and more orchestras are programming his work, such as TFO, exposing listeners to a vital part of our country's musical evolution. Dawson wrote his Lone Symphony in Chicago, completing it in 1934, and enjoyed its celebrated premiere in 4 performances by Leopold Stokowski and the Philadelphia Orchestra. Within days, it made it to Carnegie Hall, with positive impressions from the New York critics. Dawson didn't rest on his success and revised the work 3 decades later after a trip to Africa, with concerts in 1963. A new critical edition appeared in 2023. The title of the symphony merits attention, notes Gwen Cooner-Brown, a musicologist at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma and author of a biography on the composer. Quote, "The word Negro, uncomfortable to many today, was for Dawson and others of his generation a term of pride and respect. Although mainstream preferences had shifted by the time of his passing, Dawson remained committed to the old word. For him, black was a color, too limited to encompass his heritage. Throughout his life, in his teaching and his music, Dawson extolled the culture and history of his race." End quote. Dawson was encouraged by the words of fellow composer Antonin Dvorak, who alluded to American spirituals in his New World Symphony. Quote, "I am now satisfied that the future music of this country must be founded upon what are called Negro melodies. This must be the real foundation of any serious and original school of composition to be developed in the United States," he wrote. Dawson said his symphony is, quote, "symbolic of the link uniting Africa and her rich heritage with her descendants in America," end quote. The work unfolds in 3 titled movements: Bond of Africa, Hope in the Night, and Oh Let Me Shine Like a Morning Star. Early on, it quotes the spiritual Go Down Moses, and its solemn motif symbolizes the, quote, link taken out of the human chain when the first African was sent into slavery, end quote. Dawson wrote in 1963. This 4-note theme can be heard later in the symphony, adding cohesion to the whole. The second movement opens with 3 strokes on the gong, symbolic of the Trinity, followed by a song-like melody on the English horn. A middle section suggests the play of innocent children before the movement ends, rising and falling with the return of the gong. The finale is about rebirth and echoes the spiritual Hallelujah, Lord, I've been down into the sea. Excited rhythms dominate the movement and lead to an explosive coda with 4 bold chords that evoke the sound of a West African talking drum. Felix Mendelssohn, 1809 to 1847, Violin Concerto in E minor, Opus 64, performance duration approximately 26 minutes. At the age of 17, when most of us struggled through our last year of high school, Felix Mendelssohn put the finishing touches on his overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream, a marvel of music that placed him in the pantheon of the most gifted composers of any era. educated, cultured, skilled in the visual and literary arts, Mendelssohn was prepped for greatness and included in his circle of friends such giants as Goethe and Schumann. But he stayed safely within his comfort zone, a loyalist rather than a futurist. He believed in preserving the essential works of the past, especially Bach, and it was Mendelssohn who conducted the monumental but then forgotten St. Matthew Passion, leading to a Bach revival that has never waned. His best-loved work, arguably, is the Radiant Violin Concerto of 1844, which belongs among those of Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Bruch, and Sibelius. Rich in melody, as well as the coherence of its 3 uninterrupted movements, the work has endured as a model of fluency between theme and accompaniment. It doesn't hurt to be loaded with good tunes. Quote, "Its abundant melodies sound totally spontaneous and instantly memorable," writes Conrad Wilson in his book Notes on Mendelssohn. Their problem today is that their sheer familiarity in all but the best performances can make them sound tarnished and open to superficiality, but superficial, they are not. End quote. Famed for its melody and the seamless flow of its movements, the concerto stands as a model of restrained romanticism. Moves of pathos, melancholy, and exuberance drive the music forward in the opening allegro, and a lone bassoon leads the listener into a reserved slow section. A brief interlude introduces the finale, a puckish movement full of sparkle and bravado. The violin zipping off its honey-like lines as the orchestra offers alert support from behind. Although the entire work sounds effortless to the ear, it's anything but, says TFO concertmaster Jeffrey Moulter. Quote, "When you dig into it and realize what he was doing with harmony and form, it's like, wow," he said. "It's incredibly exacting and exposed and difficult to play, and everyone knows every note, so a performance has to be perfect." George Enescu, 1881 to 1955. Romanian Rhapsody No. 1, Opus 11. Performance duration approximately 11 minutes. When people mention child prodigies in music, we immediately think of Mozart or Mendelssohn. Add George Enescu to the list. Born in Liveni, Romania, he grew up with an innate musical ear, a voracious appetite for creating sound, and eventually a flair for composing. He also was a formidable pianist, violinist, and conductor, and drew accolades from fellow performers. The cellist Pablo Casals called him, quote, "the greatest musical phenomenon since Mozart," while violinist Yehudi Menuhin, a student of Enescu, touted him as, quote, "one of the true wonders of the world." The Russian violinist David Oistrakh described him simply as, quote, "God." His life and works are honored in a national museum in Bucharest. He also was a bit of a braggart. He once said he could replicate from memory the scores to all the Beethoven symphonies, and to show off his prowess, he played 48 violin sonatas from memory in a series of 16 recitals. For all this promotion, his music seldom appears in concert halls, so any performance can be considered a long overdue treat, said TFO music director Michael Francis. Quote, "It's an amazing orchestral showpiece," he said. "He's Romanian's most famous composer, and this work taps into its national pride. Not many pieces can follow the Mendelssohn on this program, but this will bring the house down," end quote. Enescu began writing his 2 Rhapsodies as a 19-year-old in 1901. And introduced them together at a concert in Bucharest 2 years later. They remain the most popular of his 33 published works, and for good reason. The first Rhapsody became Enescu's signature piece, following the model of Franz Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsodies, in its imaginative use of folk melodies. A solo clarinet opens with a theme from the drinking song, "I have a penny and wish to spend it on a drink," repeated by the oboe and then the orchestra. A second theme appears as a slow wedding dance, accompanied by dual harps that mimic the sound of a dulcimer. The wedding dance returns on a solo viola, and then the woodwinds join in on a folk song known as The Lark. What makes all this exciting is the ever-increasing tempo, the orchestra gaining speed and momentum in an exhilarating crescendo that ends with a knockout punch designed to bring an audience to its feet. This season, we wanted to give you a few key things to listen for in each Masterworks program. Here's what to keep an ear out for in this program. Quotes from American spirituals simmer throughout William Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony, which ends in an explosion of rhythms inspired by the composer's trip to Africa. Don't expect the customary orchestral introduction in Felix Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. The violin jumps in at the onset and offers a surprising cadenza early on. In George Enescu's Romanian Rhapsody No. 1, the composer blends together Romanian folk songs and swirls them in increasingly fast tempos, wrapping up with a crashing finish. Thank you for listening to Sound Waves with the Florida Orchestra. Enjoy the concert.